Hi, so in this section we're going to look at parallel and perpendicular lines, right? So what are parallel lines? If you guys recall from algebra, parallel lines are lines that never meet, right? They just run side by side alongside each other. And perpendicular lines are lines when they meet, right? So parallel lines would be something like that. That is, these two lines will never touch each other, they'll never cross. And then we have perpendicular lines. Right? And these lines will cross each other, but they cross each other such that that angle that they make here is 90 degrees, right? So it's a right angle. So these are perpendicular lines and these are parallel lines. Okay, so if I give you two lines, right, how do we know if those lines are parallel or perpendicular or neither, right? Now, so if I give you two lines, well, if they don't touch each other, then obviously they're parallel. Otherwise they intersect. And if they intersect, how do we know that whether they intersect at 90 degrees or not? So we have a relationship between lines that are parallel and lines that are perpendicular. Okay, so suppose L1 and L2 are two lines with slopes M1 and M2 respectively. So what that means is M1 is a slope for the line L1 and M2 is a slope for the line L2. Okay, so if L1 and L2 are parallel, then the slopes are equal. Okay, they have to have the exact same slope. And if L1 and L2 are perpendicular, then M1 times M2 is equal to -1. Or you can also think about it as M2 equals -1 over M1. Okay, so remember this is going to be important. If the two slopes are equal, then we say that the lines are parallel, and if the two slopes are negative reciprocals of each other, then we say that the lines are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so let's look at this example. So we have a line that is 2x minus 3y plus 9 equal to 0. And the objective here is to find the equation of a line which passes through the point 2, 4, and it is parallel. So part A is you want to find a line that is parallel to this point, and part B is you want to find a line that is perpendicular to L1. Right? So before we start part A or part B, what is important for us, right? If you remember, I said that the relationship between parallel and perpendicular can be determined by looking at the slopes. So if I know the slope to this line, right, then I can figure out what the slopes for the other two lines are supposed to be. So to find the slope of that line, right, I'm going to go ahead and solve for y and write it in the form y equals mx plus b. So step 1, in a sense, would be write L1 in the form y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I have 2x minus 3y plus 9 equals 0. Right, so I want to solve for y, so I want to isolate y. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract these two, so I get negative 3y equals negative 2x minus 9. All right, and so then divide by a negative 3, I get y equals negative 2 over negative 3x minus 9 over negative 3. And simplifying that, I get y equals 2/3 x plus 3. Okay, so M1 for us equals 2/3. So what we found so far was we found that the slope of the line L1, or 2x minus 3y plus 9 equal to 0, is given by M1, which is 2/3. So if I want to find a line parallel, if you recall, the two parallel lines have the same slope. So in this case, M2 or the slope of the parallel line would also have to be 2/3. And we know that that line has to pass through the point 2, 4. Right? So I can use my point slope equation here, and I can say that y minus y1 equals m2 times x minus x1. So I have y minus 4 equals 2/3 times x minus 2. Okay? And typically when we write these equations, we write them back in the general form. So how do I get it in general form? Well, one thing I can do here is I can multiply both sides by 3. If I do that, I get rid of my denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3, right? So I get 3 times y minus 4 equals 2 times x minus 2, right? So this is multiplied by 3. Okay? And so I have distribute now. So I get 3y minus 12 equals 2x minus 4. Okay? Now I want to get everything on one side and leave 0 on the other. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract these two. So I get negative 2x plus 3y, right? And I add a 4 minus 8 equal to 0. And that would be the equation of the line that is parallel. Now if you want, a lot of times people want their x's to be negative, so I can multiply the whole, to be positive. So I can multiply the whole thing by -1, and I can get 2x minus 3y plus 8 equals 0. Either of these two forms is fine, and that would be a line that is parallel to the line L1, or 2x minus 3y plus 9 equals 0. So now we want to find part B, which is you want to find a line that is perpendicular to L1, right? So for perpendicular lines, we know that m2 times m2 is equal to -1 over m1, okay? Which means this is -1 over 2/3, or that is -3 over 2. So if you want a line that is perpendicular to L1, that line has to have the slope of -3 over 2. So in this case, I have m2 is -3 over 2, and you know that it passes through the point 2, 4, right? So now I have, again, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. All right? So I have y minus 4 equals -3/2 times x minus 2. Again, I want to get it in general form, so I'm going to first multiply both sides by 2. So I get 2 times y minus 4 equals -3 times x minus 2, right? So how did I get that? By multiply by 2 on both sides. Okay, so I get 2y minus 8 equals -3x plus 6. So this is distribute. Okay, and then let's get all the terms on one side. So I get 3x plus 2y minus 14 equal to 0. And this is the equation of the line, which is perpendicular to L1, and it passes through the point 2, 4.